So we are in a debt-based collapse, and the crowding out of state is taking place. That private business isn't existing. You're not in a capitalistic society, although they're going to blame everything that happens on capitalism. You are in a cacocracy mixed society of very advanced socialism, communism attack vector in terms of your freedoms, in terms of fascist corporations intertwined with state, which has escalated recently, with government now taking direct percentages in corporations such as Intel recently by Trump. And they positioned him as this master deal maker because of The Apprentice and the supposed narrative around his property prestige, forgetting the fact that he went bankrupt 6 times and his bank was Chase Manhattan Bank, run by David Rockefeller, who never called in his loans and carried him through the last property crisis of the savings and loans in the 80s.
You are listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at dotmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
We had a great birthday party, didn't we, recently?
Yes.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I really did.
What do you like about it?
I like that so many people came from like across basically the world just to come to your birthday.
Kind of wild, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Shout out to Carol Foot, who came from Canada.
Yeah.
And Monica Gaffney, who came from New York.
Yeah.
And all the other people who travelled quite a long way.
Practically from across the opposite side of the world.
Yeah, it was really
nice. It's quite crazy.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And those are the only people who got the tickets, because I didn't want a place that was too big, because then it's kind of impersonal. I mean, I already couldn't go and speak to everyone.
Yeah.
But I think I spoke to lots of people.
You definitely did.
And they gave lots of nice cards.
Yeah, really lovely cards and presents.
Messages.
We love them all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good people.
Definitely.
People who listen to the Doc Malik podcast are pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
What do you think of the food?
Actually, really good.
You sound surprised.
Not really. Because, I mean, we've gone to the same chain of restaurants.
It's a steakhouse. Brilliant steakhouse, isn't it?
Excellent steak. I really loved the pavlova at the end.
Amazing. So, yeah, I just want to say thanks to everybody who came to my birthday bash. It was such a joy to meet you all and celebrate. It was just lovely. The atmosphere, the energy of that place was just very special. Just, it's nice to be in a space with so many wonderful people who think the same way and are awake and love freedom and love the Doc Malik podcast.
Yeah. It's also really nice that so many people were getting to know each other. Like, even if they just met, they got really well together. And it was nice to see lots of really happy people.
Yeah, and they were making friends. They were swapping numbers and making friends.
Yeah, it was really nice. It wasn't just about your birthday, though most of it was. It was also about getting to know more people and just getting together with more people.
Finding your tribe and your community is very important.
Yeah.
Did anybody come up and speak to you guys?
A couple of people, yeah.
What did they say?
Hi, we really like you on the podcast. You guys are really good. We want to see you more often.
That's nice.
And a lot of other things.
Pretty cool. All right, little one. You've got something to say. I mean, you told me something right now and I couldn't believe it. What did you see someone doing in the car?
I saw somebody feeding their dog a McDonald's burger.
Honestly?
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Some things are just insane.
What do you think of that?
I think it's very bad because different animals are meant to eat different things. We aren't meant to eat McDonald's burgers. We're not meant to eat pizza. We just made that up. And specifically the pets and stuff, lots of people are feeding them bad things that they shouldn't have. Like cats and dogs, they should have meat and healthy things, maybe fish or chicken. And lots of people are just feeding them the wrong things, like pizza, kibble, and other things. And kibble is actually very bad for them because it makes them fat and it's actually full of sugar.
Yeah. So I think you've got a really good point there. And I think I'd go as far as saying feeding a McDonald's is like almost animal cruelty, because they're not meant to be eating that thing. I'll come to you in a second, my love. But like feeding a burger to a dog is kind of wild. But yeah, you know, every animal species has got their own evolutionary food. Like
The things that they should and shouldn't eat.
Like lions don't eat carrots.
No.
They just
bunnies do.
know they don't.
Yeah.
Lions don't eat carrots, but horses and bunnies do.
Yeah. And yeah, like, so, you know, polar bears like to eat seals.
Yeah.
But they're not meant to eat apple pie.
And maybe penguins like to eat fish, but they're not meant to eat pizza.
So some animals are carnivore, some are herbivore, some are omnivore. I think we're omnivore, and I would disagree with you, young lady. I think humans are meant to eat pizza. I love a good pizza.
Like
Yes, pizza is meant for
McDonald's,
people.
like they add things to it.
Yeah.
When they
I'm pretty sure-
say, when
Does
they
McDonald's do pizza?
when they say, "Oh, would you like a chicken McDonald's or chicken breast or chicken this?" They actually get all the other parts and the bone carcasses or everything, and they churn it down, and it becomes pink slime.
That's a good point. So,
And then they like batter it so you can't see.
so how much chicken is actually in a chicken nugget is what you're trying to say?
0.
I don't think it's zero.
No, but we saw slime thingy on the internet.
Be careful what you see on the internet. A chicken McNugget is not 100% chicken meat. It's a mix of chicken and other ingredients. The actual chicken is around about 40 to 50%, but they add batter, breading, seasoning, and the oil to make it. And so even the chicken meat itself, we don't know what quality of chicken meat it is. So the thing about animals, I had a professor on called Thomas Seyfried, and he said, do you know in the zoos, they don't give monkeys pizzas and burgers. Not because they wouldn't like it. He goes, they would love it. He asked the zookeeper, would the monkeys like the pizzas and burgers? He went, yeah, of course they would. And then he said to the zookeeper, why don't you give these monkeys and other animals that, you know, other food like crisps and chocolate? He said, it's animal cruelty. Because these animals are not designed to be eating this garbage, and they'll get sick and cancer and diabetes. And then Thomas Seyfried said, isn't it funny that if you give animals the wrong food, it's animal cruelty, but you can give humans the wrong food and it's not human cruelty? If you think about it, it's actually quite cruel to give humans bad food, processed food. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're just nodding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm really glad at the birthday bash we had some nice food, proper wholesome food. And, you know, yes, it's a steakhouse, but there's some vegetarian food and even vegan food. And as long as it's healthy, wholesome ingredients, I think it's fine.
Yeah.
Like at your birthday, or like, sorry, not your birthday bash, but at your at some places like supermarkets, if, for example, there's a vegan who really wants sausages, but they can't have sausages, they make fake meat. Fake meat. And then they say, this is vegan sausages. And actually, they just put...
I don't know why they make fake meat. If you're vegan,
You know, like...
why would you want anything that's like fake meat?
Yeah, like if you're vegan, you made
Why
the
would you
decision
even want
yourself.
Yeah, you don't like meat, so then don't eat meat.
If you think about it, plants are kind of like alive, like they're growing and stuff just like us.
What do you mean kind of alive? They're very much alive.
Yeah, they make their own food. It's
Yeah.
like making food yourself in the kitchen.
Do you know what I learned today?
What?
They also require bacteria to bring the nutrients to them. The bacteria, my guest today, Rachel Matthews, was saying, the soil is incredible, and the bacteria, the plants work with the bacteria. And say, for example, they want magnesium, which is a nutrient, and they don't have it, they'll produce a special type of sugar that a special type of bacteria will eat, and in return for the sugar, the bacteria will give the plant magnesium. How smart is that?
It's like, I'll give you this, and you're allowed to eat it, if I can have some magnesium. It's a fair trade.
Win-win.
Like, they don't have money, so why don't they just trade their qualities? Maybe. or
Like
the things,
food.
or the things that they can do.
Have you heard about win-win scenarios?
Yeah.
Yeah, you told us
Good.
several times.
Have I?
Yes.
What do I mean by win-win?
Like,
instead of
Oh, whoa, one at a time.
instead of somebody winning, like in a race, and somebody losing, maybe it's a tie. They both win. Or maybe they shared the trophy. They both get a win. They both claimed this and this. They're both a win.
Okay, how about you? Can you describe what the win-win?
I'll say that instead of like you win or you lose, instead you do it so that like basically both of you win. So instead of like kind of in stuff like football matches, that is a win and lose scenario. But and sometimes like
In life.
yeah, like in life there can be win-win situations.
I think a lot of the time. So
Yeah.
you're almost there. So what I'm trying to say with the win-win is a lot of people in this world think I need to win, but I need to win at your expense. So I need to win, but in the process, you need to lose. And that's how I will win. So you lose, I win. And that's a scarcity mindset. That's like, there's not enough food on the table. I need to get it all and you need to have nothing. But an abundance mindset is like, oh, there's plenty of food on the table. There's enough for you to be happy and there's enough for me. And the win-win philosophy is, you don't need to lose for me to win. How about you win and I win? And not just that, both of us winning will be greater than just if either one of us won.
Or you can both have your ways, but one of you doesn't go home unhappy and one of you doesn't go, yay, I won, you're a loser, yay.
So imagine like 2 + 2 = 4, right?
Yeah.
Well, a win-lose philosophy is I get 4, you get 0. Or I get 3 and you get 1.
A win-win will be I get 2 and you get 2. I get half and you get another half.
No, it's even more than that. Win-win
What?
philosophy is,
You get 4 and the other person gets 4.
yeah, we'll get that 2 and 2 and add it together and we'll make something even bigger and more. So exactly, you'll get 4 and I'll get 4. That's the win-win philosophy. We will make more out of our combined efforts if we work
Yeah.
together.
Instead of like, so like you said, like with efforts, instead of just having like you two like working in a competition or anything like against each other,
Yeah,
you work together.
collaboratively.
Because then with 2 mindsets, is better than 1. Because then you'll have more ideas, and the more ideas, the better. Because, for example, maybe one person will have one slightly simple idea, and maybe the other person can add something onto that person number 1 would never think about.
I'll give an example. That's a really good example. Well done. There's a podcaster out there, and I think he's really quite good. And I said, hey, you want to come on my podcast? And then I'll come on your podcast. And we'll get to speak to a new audience, and you can increase the number of people listening and get more supporters. And you know what this podcaster said?
He said no, because I don't want people to think, oh, look, this guy's very good, so I'm going to go onto his podcast, not
Exactly.
yours. And I'm not going to think, actually, no one's going to do that. They might go, oh, these guys are both brilliant podcasts. I'm going to go watch both of their shows.
Absolutely.
But what really is
Absolutely.
going
Or
to
maybe
happen...
this person is brilliant. Yes, maybe I should check out some more of his podcasts.
And not just that. Bingo, you're on this money. So this guy goes, I've got a podcast already. If I have you on my podcast, that's like me shooting myself in the foot. And I was like, that's not, dude. My audience gets to hear about you. Your audience gets to hear about me. And if I've got any guests that I like, you can always ask me and I'll introduce them. We can work together. And he's like, no. I was like, all right, fine. It's a bit weird.
You can just stay with
But you know
your
what?
way.
We definitely don't have a win-win mindset.
No, and there's a lot of people like that. But like, I'm happy telling people, like, for example, one of my favorite podcasts right now is a guy called Charlie Robinson, Macroaggressions. I love it. And I think my listeners should listen to it. And I'm not scared that my listeners are going to be like, oh my God, we're going to leave Ahmed and go to, Charlie. Guys,
It's
like, no.
Can't
That's
you be
just not how it
subscribed to
works.
more than 1?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like you don't have to only be if you subscribe to one podcast. That doesn't mean that you can't like other podcasts and subscribe to them doesn't mean that the subscribe buttons now disappeared because you've already subscribed to Doc Malik podcast and maybe you want another podcast. You don't have to delete your podcast or you don't have to delete another to leave a different one. Why don't you just go to both of them?
Absolutely. Folks, I love you. I think that's quite a long introduction. Maybe we should stop now and get onto the podcast. Has anybody got anything burning they want to get off their chest?
No.
You're happy?
Yeah.
You're hungry?
Yeah.
I can tell. How about you, my love?
I'm fine.
You're okay?
Yeah.
You're hanging tough?
I'd like something to say at the end.
All right, but this is the time, my love.
No, at the end. Trust me.
Okay, fine. Well, listen, folks, I'm going to move on to the podcast now with Francis Hunt. This, I'll be honest with you, it was a mixture of emotions. I felt quite down listening to him, but also empowered. I think he makes some really good points. There's two parts to this podcast. One where we discuss the whole financial element to things and the agenda that we're facing in the next 10 to 15 years. And the second half will be about solutions and how people can protect themselves from this very nefarious and dark future that is beholding the West. But now I'm going to move on to our podcast. This is your last final moment, my love. Do you want to say what you wanted to say?
Okay. Can you please subscribe and like my dad's podcast because we could really use it.
Oh, thanks, my love. I didn't tell you to say that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Folks, if you can, follow my podcast on Apple or Spotify, if you can leave a nice review, 5-star review, if you value the show, and if you are listening for free, do you know what? At least buy me a coffee now and again, or subscribe to my paid Substack. It really helps support the show and keep this going. All right, folks. Thank you so much. Love you loads. Bye-bye. Get started. So basically, I was just off air telling you that we're like this coin, this silver coin, but two faces. And we've got so much in common. We've got so much in common. But I'm from a medical background. You're obviously from the trader, financial background. And I'll be honest, mate. I'll be honest with you. You trade in charts. I trade in stories, right? I'm not embarrassed to say that. I am not one who knows about the lower lows and the lower highs and the funnels and the 3 strikes rule and the bounces. And I don't want to get into that technical jargon because that'll leave me and my audience like, what the fuck are you talking about? But I get a gist of what you're saying. But if we can stay away from that technical stuff right now, maybe on another podcast as people get to know you, we can get there, because I think it is important that we understand, because like you said, the charts tell you what they're doing. Ignore what they're saying, see what they're doing. I get all that. But if we can just claw back from that, what I wanted to talk about in this podcast, Francis, is, let's talk about the hyper-stagflation. Let's talk about why everyone, everywhere in the world is feeling the pinch. And I mean, mainly the Western world, New Zealand, Australia, South Africa, Canada, America. Everyone's complaining the same thing. Here in Londistan, everything is expensive. Food is expensive. Bills are expensive. I've got money in their pocket, but it's not getting anywhere. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about why'd you say this is a debt-based crash, right? Because it's a fiat-based crash. I want to talk about why silver is being kept down. I want to talk about why gold is important. I want to talk about the geopolitics of everything, the bankers' wars. I want to talk about today is 9/11, 24th anniversary. What an amazing day. I mean, fucking hell. I mean, this is when everything came out in the open, this whole shit show. And that's just a little taster. But before I let you speak, I just want to say thank you to my friend Karam, who's a doctor, who said, dude, a long, long time ago, you need to get Francis on your show. And so Karam, thank you for making this all possible. Right. Francis, was that all right? Is that okay where I want to talk about?
100%. It's practical, useful information for people who are non-technical. And there's so much that needs to be understood in that space. So please go on.
Right. So let's talk about, first of all, why you talk about this hyper-stagflation. People, it'd be good if they know what stagflation is. It's a combination of stagnation, inflation, and just, falling purchasing power. There's no economic growth, right? prices are going up for goods and services and food, and no one's earning more money. Like, it's just not there. That's stagnation, stagflation. Why do you talk about it? Like, why is it important, and what's the context, and what's driving it?
It's such a foundational principle of the economic environment. Many times when I tell stories too, I'm a reasonable storyteller. You're obviously a very good one. I tell stories too, and I say things like, you're functioning in a certain environment. You've been birthed into a certain environment that you had no control over. You are the individual, and then you're given this environment. And I even like to joke, I could be a better surfer than Kelly Slater just by being in front of a very average wave, hopping on and getting a partial ride, providing I put him on the flat Mediterranean Sea where there's nothing for him. And the reason I say something stupid that on the surface sounds random like that is it's a function of the environment. Talented people can fail in the wrong environments. Average executors can succeed to an extreme degree in a decent environment. And understanding the environment, and I'm not talking green here, I'm talking about the setting, the entire stage that has been laid for your life, which includes many things. So, of course, each of us have a mother and a father. Obviously, if one was a manic depressant, it would have a certain effect on you in your childhood. That's very zone one. And you're in London, so if I talk about zone one, you'll understand proximity environmental feature. Your mother was a manic depressant. Okay, she was upset, she was angry, she visited some of that on you. Okay, that's one thing. Then you get sort of zone 2, 3, and other things. We can go more examples. It could be sibling, family members, friends. Then you go on to country environment. You yourself are born in Scotland, but you could have been born originally in Pakistan, India, maybe anywhere else. It's very hard to be a nuclear physicist if you're a Ghanaian. Maybe, yes, there's schools, yes, there's things, but who spots the talent? Who cares enough to get you to water the plants? Let's just put it that way. So they're actually hubs where talent is fermented. I was always amazed by the British music scene. So I'm just going to story tell and you have some fun. You can tell me to hurry up if you're frustrated in any way.
No.
The South African music scene actually has quite a lot of great musicians, but will never compete with the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has the weather that people play guitars for, and it had hubs, history, and take up and scale. And then there's the whole US Hollywood factory. And we will certainly be coming to that one, judging by how you introduced in its own right. But in terms of actually being found, discovered, people get sucked into a hub zone. Kelly Slater will kill everyone in surfing the minute he's got a half-decent wave and in the right conditions. Now, part of being a great surfer is also being cognizant of the conditions. He doesn't go out on a flat day. He's watching weather. He's doing all sorts of things. And I'm I've gone under acronyms, John the Baptist, which is a sort of a Christian, the town crier for the Messiah type name acronyms before, because I've always felt I look forward and I'm a futurist inherently. It's a skill. And one of my favorite sayings is the seeds of I suppose the fruits of tomorrow are in the seeds of today. If you look closely enough at those seeds in the hand, you'll find out whether you're eating grapefruits, pomegranates, or it's actually cauliflower that's coming down the road. And it's the trend observations and the extrapolations thereof, and some of the detail, the smaller detail that looks innocuous but keeps occurring, always end up being there for a reason. It is a stage, there is a set. For some reason, there's a grandfather clock that goes bong every now and then. It's going to be part of the story. Somebody's going to say, what time did this happen in the show that you're watching? All of these aspects. So inherently, I am to quite a forensic level detail futurist via observation of things, some things small and some things that are very obvious. And inherently, that dictates not only what is your environment, but what is the trajectory and trend of that environment, which is also why listening to me now, I will tell you that even though living standards right now in the US are better than places, maybe probably the aggregate in South Africa, I'm from there, or even, Malaysia, Indonesia, the trajectory for everything is very, very different. It's a bit like someone is selling you the all-time high on the dotcom in 1999, and you go, this is valuable and it's a great environment, it's going up. And someone else is offering you gold at 2,000, at $255 at your Scottish close friend, Gordon Brown, who sold all Britain's silver and gold, by that I mean the gold, 400 tons of worth. Well, I don't actually think it left anywhere. I think some people that control and put him into power had him do that transaction, and all that happened is a name changed on a clipboard. In other words, the British people were robbed on something that had, and that's a perfect example of trajectory and environment. The environment post-dot-com, which was a huge melt-up and hot money, we had economically the Goldilocks period. You may have heard this phrase, you may not, under Alan Greenspan. The Goldilocks period was, there's no inflation, everything is awesome. I was in the UK during that time. You might not have been very far away from me. If you were in the classic Doctors, what's that, with a H, a street, Harley Street, is it? London in that time, I would have been quite close. I worked in West Hampstead, I was in St. Albans. All of that was going on. When I first came over there, we then went into the dot-com boom. I arrived in 99 for the peak of that dot-com boom.
Yeah, we were definitely close, because I was in Stanmore and central London during those 2000s. And I remember the boom times. I lived just in Bermondsey, just behind the river, like front. And I would say to people, like, what is this boom time? People are, the glasses of champagne are clinking. People are out in the streets eating. The bars are bursting. The restaurants are full. Like, this is like, where's this money coming from? Where's this easy credit? Everyone's been given credit cards and this and that. I was like, this is like fake. Like, this isn't real money. And my family and my friends who are like accountants are like, no, you don't understand. It's complicated. And I was like, well, it just doesn't make sense to me. I'll tell you that.
Fabulous that you mentioned that, because you're taking me memory lane. When I was in that company, and it put a .com next to its name to try pump up its potential for listing as being part of the whole listing boom. London used to do a lot of initial share offerings. Those don't happen anymore. IPOs, I think we used to call them. And we used to have these Friday drinks where, sometimes the manager would just lord it all up. Everyone was getting absolutely mullered. There was all sorts of things going around. It was party festival, go, and hire and grow and everything. It was all about growth. And during that environment, we had Greenspan in 96. He actually said irrational exuberance, which was a foundational phrase that got repeated many times, which kind of is what you and I are referring to. And he said it in 96, amazingly, and you still had 4 more years of the same to go. And inherently, this was called Goldilocks. And the analogies, I'm quite metaphorical in how I explain things, was essentially we outsourced everything to China. You might remember Phil Green, who was quite an objectionable man, who ran British Home Stores. He got all the manufacture pushed to China. He was getting in cheap goods. There were all these upgraded. You could have things that often mimic the high fashion. I mean, you have wives and daughters, I'm sure, proximity. They'd be able to dress really cool at the BHS store that used to do these things. And they were all made quite cheap. And prices at the till, whilst you would say they weren't static, they were inherently broadly stable, especially compared to wages and commission checks and getting people on board. I powered ahead in that era, thanks to the environment. And in actual fact, on that point on environment, when I arrived in 99, they said, you don't want to get property. We had a huge bust at the beginning of the 90s and all of this. And I saw the easy money. I saw what Greenspan and Mervyn King, who was the Bank of England at the time, were up to. And I disagreed entirely. And I managed to borrow I came call me penniless for want of a better phrase, at that time. And I borrowed a 5% to get a 95% down loan. I got a personal loan. So I got approval for a 95%. Said, yes, I'll be bringing the deposit. After that, run the credit check, I went and got a personal loan for the $5,000 and jumped on an ex-council clinker that turned into a cash machine ATM for me regularly for all my business ventures that followed, which included a property company where we ended up doing around 6.5 million in turnover, which was a big number back then, just two of us, me and a chap from the Midlands with a mobile phone and an internet connection. I was drumming up clients who wanted to buy discounted buy-to-let property, or remember the buy-to-let boom, and this was all based on the trend. This was all based on that particular trend. Of course, the dot-com did end in 2000, and in fact, America went into a bit of a recession, but that whole era was quickly repumped again subsequently with the housing narrative. So they pivoted from IPO, dot-com, internet shares to the housing narrative. And we literally went from boom to boom with small
I was going to say, like, there was literally a break of about a year, and then we picked back up again. It was quite bizarre.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is I worked in various businesses during that time. And the great irony, I refer to myself as the Forrest Gump of the economic history of the last 10, 20 years. Because believe it or not, as a South African, I wanted to get into the city. I wanted to trade. I had an MBA. I had, those kind of skills. And quite clearly, London wasn't waiting for little old South African boy Francis to show up. And I didn't get that. I became what was called an account manager, a key account manager in the financial services division of a consulting company that had healthcare, that ran oncology and cancer models, and that was their big product. Tech and various other divisions, including automotive and, various, they were slightly smaller, less cool. So the big divisions were financial services and technology then. Healthcare was very strong and big too. But tech subsequently lost its blue-eyed boy name after the dot-com, and then healthcare became the thing because everything became a bit defensive for a few years after the crash. But anyway, I had clients, and one of my clients was, wait for it, HSBC. And Barclays. And Barclays were entering into low standard lending. That's my phrase. It was originally called non-standard lending. It means non-traditional. And basically it's a polite way of saying those were the shit score. And
high risk.
And it was our worst selling report. And then suddenly this report started flying off the shelves. And all of them were looking at it. And I ran a lot of these big accounts, as I say, Barclays, NatWest, and I had the guy sitting opposite me who had Royal Bank of Scotland and Bank of Scotland and the ones closer to home for you. I had Standard Life, which brought me up to Edinburgh, which I understand Scotland's your home. I didn't get the town in the end, but I'm sure you'll tell me. Anyway, so I personally witnessed this, and we did consulting, and we had financial consultants and analysts, and I was meant to know a lot about the product so that I could be essentially a glorified salesman, I would say, but a consultant too, but on the more account side. But we had to be savvy, and we had to know our content to be able to sell it. And we tried to keep Barclays out of low end. They bought Providian, which was a low end subprime credit card. And then HSBC, basically at the peak of around 2004-5, decided they were looking at it. They'd been too conservative for too long. And all these other banks share prices were really running. And big old HSBC, Hong Kong Singapore Bank, by the way, got everything to do with the Sassoon family marrying into the Rothschild family and being the bank to the Opium Wars. Ironic, because later they got fined for Mexico's drug cartel money laundering as well. No one ever goes to jail. It's part and parcel. But just I suppose a little bit of color there for those that like it. Anyway, so we went and they were nice people that I met on the day. They're not involved with those kind of decisions that I've just been making reference to. And they were saying, we're getting a lot of heat, the Scottish banks were actually turning very aggressive, which is quite unlike Scottish, which are quite stoic, conservative in terms of their money handling. There's many a gag that people make at a poor Scotsman's offense, but they became the go-go banks. Royal Bank and Bank of Scotland and HSBC were feeling the heat because their share price weren't moving. And they went and bought a door-to-door lender that sold credit called Household at basically near the top for billions. I mean, it was a great sale for Household, which is an American. They have a whole different lending environment there, as you're probably aware. They are a lender plus. People don't even know what they're paying for things. They only know their monthlies over there. I drive around looking at the signs with like 90-month car loans on 45% residuals. You know, these guys are unbelievable. The tertiary extractors, the Pharisees and tertiary extractors have got the tick well embedded into the throat of that mule. Let me tell you that much. But anyway, long story. So we're going long form here. So I literally saw subprime from within. We said, don't do it. Our advice was don't do it. Better to stay stoic and conservative. There's a lending cycle. Anyway, dotcom was a warning and a real slap in the face. Britain skipped over it a little bit because we had listed a fair amount, but we weren't as equity focused as the US, and we had the property market that had been strong all the way through, that had a sort of dip, but not too much, and then it went even further into roaring territory. And I was parallel running my account management job and doing nights on the business until I had to go full time with my partner, who was doing things during the day. As I say, we built and ran a very successful company that essentially died when we fell out and the cycle ended, which coincided at the same time. And that was seeing the environment and being very wealthy. I mean, we had the footballers, Bentley GT cars each, you know, he had a red one, I had a gray. We had no money. We had no expenses. We ran that business on mobile phones, internet connections at home, and I paid for the Google AdWords account. That was our only expenses. We were just so profitable. And it was money for old rope as a businessman. But I was not someone who was a property developer by name. We bought wholesale sites. We went up to Manchester. We bought entire sites. When I say bought, we agreed contractually to buy, and then we backed in everybody else's future mortgage money once we had placed them with people that were keen to buy. We used to own that phrase, discounted property, for the investor on Google AdWords. So I jumped onto the trend that was Google AdWords. That's my kind of little bit of my story of being in the UK. But the whole point I'm making is recognizing where you are in the trend. And let's bring it back, because otherwise I'll be giving you my life story and no one will be listening. But recognizing where you are on the trend. And the question you asked is, what do you mean by hyper-stagflation? So getting back to that question, you had those decade and a half of Goldilocks economy, essentially till levels staying fairly low, climbing slowly, we have to say. There was inflation at the till. Now, it's important we define inflation carefully. In truth, inflation is any environment where new money is being borrowed into existence. That's what people watching this program don't know. They think it's when your bread and milk goes up in price. That is a symptom of inflation, and it's often in the cycle, the pumpermentals days, the roaring 20s that we had, because I do believe we're going into a chronic depression with all sorts of associated aspects to come. So it's a bit doomer, but bear with me. There's opportunities in those environments, and if you position correctly, I mean, you know, let's think of it. Let's have some dark humor. During CV19, which I'm sure we're going to touch on, the people burying bodies did quite well. You know, it was better to be, in the funeral home business than in other businesses. So there's always an opportunity, and this is DeMartini. Regardless of the environment, there's always an opportunity. So if I start saying things that make you feel, ooh, I don't want to listen anymore, that's so scary, he's such a doomer, he's a harbinger of pure doom, then you're just wearing the wrong, they often say there's no wrong weather, you're just in the wrong kit for the weather.
Yeah. And
if everyone else is in the wrong kit, you should be in your Macintosh selling Macintoshes. to people that have gone to watch a football game who don't have them. So this is what you have to do. If given lemons, make lemonade, as they say in America. So the whole point is bringing everybody who's listening to me to a point where they understand the environment, the trajectory of that environment, how it ends, and how well that they do a stock take on how well are they personally positioned for that environment. Most people not well. However, the people that position in the small fractal of space that is absolutely going to flourish very well. Our most popular YouTube is the polarization of society. This is a polarizing event that we are facing. So you had the glory boom, all the money was being printed and created, but instead of getting inflation at the till, you kind of had global warming and global dimming at the same time. Not that I subscribed in any way to the climate theory, by the way. That's another scam, but we'll come back to that one. But I'm just using the analogy. It's potential for you to have two forces that are polar opposite, that mask things. So while they were creating all this money, and Greenspan saying, still no inflation, got to let them lend and create some more money, the money was chasing assets, and things were going up in mark-to-market value. Your home isn't worth. I sold my home in the bottom of the market post the crash at 1.25 million pounds. It isn't worth that. It isn't worth whatever you think it is now. It's worth, when you come to sell it, what other people can afford to pay, especially if there's a lender in the room who's going to be less prone to originating debt items, wanting bigger deposits and harsher underwriting, and has a more pessimistic view for the job market in the area where you're working or anywhere as a whole. And therefore the rates get charged accordingly. So this is things people need to measure. A sense of valuation is not real. You all could be selling your houses for £150,000 whilst thinking you're sitting in £500,750,000 because you haven't fully understood that most buyers are utilizing banks. So we had this glorious asset push-up. They do a pump before they do a dump. And I think you know who I'm referring to. The Pharisees, the usury extractors, the one time Jesus was violent and overthrew the tables and, chased them out. And probably the reason why they chose a murderer over him when it came to sparing life. His ideas and his principles were dangerous to their way of existence, way more than some wild murdering fool who will eventually cop it in one way or another. And so Barabbas survived and I'm not preaching Christianity here or anything. I'm just telling a story. Jesus didn't. So in that whole narrative, we had this. The dimming forces that were keeping a lid on prices was globalization. Everything going to China, Bengal. But there were consequences. We were the fat rich kids. I say Western world, which often speaks English, but we'll include Europe in that. So if we take the English-speaking, predominantly, let's say, white European, without trying to, I'm not bringing race into this, but...
No, I get it. It's okay. UK, keep going.
Australia, New Zealand, Europe, North America, all of this. We were living like high on the hog. And we were buying items that were actually very affordable, but you would have Bengali kids that were sewing your Nike footballs for you. They weren't telling you that. The big corporations didn't want you to know how they were bringing work to the masses in areas where there was an excess of labor. There was no laws to protect labor. There weren't even child labor laws, and certain sins started to get found out. But that, as you can see, was very disinflationary, because they were paying kids pittance and keeping them in poor working environments and didn't have to give them days off apart from one day on a weekend, etc., etc. They could just flog, push. It was slave labor. The technocratic corporate fascists that sold you shiny, nice things in your Western store were building them on the backs of sweat, toil, often illegally done at quite harsh working conditions, someplace far away in the planet. And as I say, you always pay the piper. And we'll be getting to that part now. So where we are now is the reason the till prices didn't move too much is we were this absolute surge in trade and mercantilism. Mercantilism is manufacture that there, trade it and bring it across with a bit of tertiary extraction and all of the other things and the intermediaries. And that's how Phil Green got to be so rich, owning BH stores and selling it, until, of course, that ended. And then his wife seemed to have who lived in Monaco, got billions in dividends during the good years. And then the pension fund was left empty, which is
I remember that.
And it also mirrors Maxwell before him. This is a rinse repeat of Vampire.
Every single time.
Every single time. Absolutely. And soulless, angry and embittered about it. But at one point he was so enamored and this businessman of the moment that the Tories brought him in as an economic advisor. Look at this man. And he was laughing and getting close to politicians. And everybody was waving through £1 billion dividend payments to his wife, who lived permanently in Monaco. And he was flying back and forwards and all of this stuff off the back of cheap labor. Slavery is their game. Tertiary extraction is their game.
Sorry, can you just pause? When you say tertiary, we're talking about usury. We're talking about the thing that all major religions, bar one, have banned and said you're not allowed to do. Usury.
And I give credit to the Islamic nation for being very explicit on that as well. There's no more clear than the Muslim faith on usury and the corrosiveness of it. And this comes from a wisdom because they lived with the same mercantilists that came from that step. Marco Polo, everyone thinks there was just Marco Polo, the Italian, going to China. That ransoming, kidnapping, stealing your goods, borrowing, telling you the tribe over the hill wants to attack you, you should buy some arms or have them paid as an army. These were typical warmongery ruses that enriched this mercantilist class. And they never went away.
They never went away.
Modernized their practice. And on the opium trade, by the way, which was when British, young white British soldiers were forced under the crown to get in boats, sail from, you look at the map, where bloody Little Blighty is, to the other side of the goddamn planet, to enforce the right of the Dutch East India Company held by those coffee shop owner mercantilists that who we are referring to, that they could sell drugs, which the Chinese decided they didn't want anymore because it was turning their women into prostitutes who were being abused by the same people. It was turning people into slaves to the drug, the men into useless write-offs. It was a very beautiful and sophisticated society, the Chinese society. You're talking about people that did Ming vases, had the printing press well before West, all sorts of magnificence. And the culture was gutted and it was turned into a communist. And the same handlers were there bringing the communist ideas, as are always there. And a large part of their lovely culture was destroyed. Look, it's not to say that the Chinese never had a fight amongst themselves, if you read their history, but that goes for everybody. We've all had our scraps. And
dude, just pause for a second. Just get a breath. I love your knowledge and breadth, and I fucking love you, guy, mate. Seriously, but 100% right. Listen, I'm not a Muslim anymore. I should just clarify that. But I agree. Every religion has got some really good shit in it, like really good stuff. But in that Arabian Peninsula, believe it or not, I couldn't believe it. There was all this mercantile class there. They were still big there, and I think the Muslims, there was a big backlash to all of that kind of mercantilism, and that's why they were like, no usury. And and I always say, like, Christianity, the West fell not now with mass migration, but when they allowed usury to happen, because Jesus was very clear about it. There's no usury, but they did it, and it went in, and it's always the same class that leads the East India Company, the Dutch East India Company. It's all the corporatism, the mercantile class. They prop up in front of them the politicians and the royal families, when actually they're the ones, the puppet masters pulling the strings. Even the royal families are beholden to these people because they have debt to them. They need to pay them, and then they say, we'll pay you by taxing our citizens. So that's how they control countries and nations. But even like the way you're talking about China, the same was the Indian subcontinent where my family's from. It was a rich, prosperous place. Like the kings and rajas and the queens, they were dripping with pearls and gold. And when the Brits came, they were like, their mouths were open, like, wow, they have silks and cottons and beautiful clothes and jewelry. And they don't like, what the hell? We need to get some of this shit. We need to get in on this. And by hook and crook, they did it. And it's all subversive. And whether it's, the gunboat diplomacy, which people need to understand, like literally driving a gunboat down your river and saying, we're going to bomb your cities unless you take our drugs. I mean, unbelievable. Our history, our wealth is built on the back of so much theft and corruption and evil.
Yeah.
But I want to say it's not about color. It's not just about religion. I always say the first people that were enslaved really in modern history were the white people, the Irish people, the Scottish people.
Yeah.
The slaves in America initially were indentured white slaves from Scotland and Ireland. This whole potato famine was bullshit.
And they sold for cheaper as well. Interestingly, the Irish, because it was harder to get the African slaves. You had to go there. But again, the same people were behind the trade. You didn't bother on a Saturday, which was the Sabbath, because the merchants were, and the boats were, the owners of the boats were. The stat they have is 0.3% of white Americans owned slaves, 40% of Jews did. So the slave trade was deeply part of that, and they didn't fetch them themselves. It was other Africans catching Africans, and then they would just buy them at the ports.
And what was what was crazy as well is that you think like the plantation owners or the slave trade people are like just the evil people, but even they were just one ship journey, one bad business from being indebted and being killed. They were even the slave traders were all in debt to the same class of people.
100%. In fact, the derivatives market was built on insurance of ships, particularly going around South Africa, which of course the Suez Canal was not around, and it was known as the Cape of Storms before it became the Cape of Good Hope. Yeah. And you would lose all the people. Usually they would drown, and you would lose all the merchants, all the goods that you'd got and paid for and put. So it had a high loss. It was a high run rate, and so they actually would forward sell some of the value and forego some of the profits to share the risk out. And again, the Amsterdam and the London coffee shops and the legacy families were these traders. So one of my biggest sins that everybody does is that, I mean...
By the way, just go back in time a little bit. You know who I think was a real traitor? I think Cromwell was.
Huge.
Massive.
He brought him back in. Yeah, he brought him back in. You read the story. I was just reading again over that, and I was thinking the exact same thing. You banish an undesirable for a reason. Yeah, and the gates of Toledo is Spain. That's another traitorous act done by, again, the same people that saw Spanish be overrun by the Moroccan and the North African via treachery, basically. You're talking about Trojan horse within you pretending to be your friend. And one of my biggest complaints is people nation-state things. I'm not an apologist for Britain, but if you talk about colonialism and imperialism and all of this, very few people, virtually every people say that they will attack a Brit on the streets for saying, well, your nation did this, you deserved everything that's coming to you. What actually they mean is, the Boer War, as a South African, they were sent out there. They didn't have too much choice. The actual working class kid from the Liverpool, I'm a Liverpool fan, and it's called the Kop End, which is an Afrikaans name for hill, the hill. They were sent to die without much option as soldiers, and they were not good soldiers in comparison to a very nuggety Afrikaner huntsman, white African, if I can, and they died like dogs. And then they called on the Anzac forces to help, and they got sent up. And they were saying, well, it's a population
I'm
not the size of...
I'm so glad. Sorry, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm so glad you're making this distinction. This is why I get really angry when people talk about, there's a white guilt and white shame, and white people, cause harm to themselves by saying, this white burden, our ancestors were cruel and evil.
Self-flagellation. I call them self-flagellation.
That's it. Self-flagellation. So take, for example, where I'm from. I'm from Glasgow, right? Scotland. Yeah. I was born there, but the Scots were everywhere in the world. They were running the empire. Do you know why? I'll tell you why. Because after the Charles I got executed and Cromwell went back up and the Battle of Culloden, they screwed over the Scots. They took away their Gaelic culture, their language. They weren't allowed to speak that language. They totally took over Scotland. Remember, Charles was a Scottish king, you know, the House of Stuart.
To say that they isn't the average Englishman in
No,
the street. That's part
exactly.
of my nation-stating thing, because the Scotsman think it's his divine right to hate an everyday Englishman.
Yes. But it's not. But when the English army, organized by you know who, went to Scotland and the Battle of Culloden and destroyed Scottish culture and Scottish, all these young fit men, they went like, look, come over as mercenaries. We'll pay you now to go over and run our colonies and our empire elsewhere. And that's what they do. They transplant the conquered people and then use them to serve in wars elsewhere and attack other people. And it's like, that's the way it works. And it's not your average Scot that's just the bad person, the average English or the average Irish people. All these people are actually being captured and subjugated themselves. And then they go on and subjugate another group of people. And then they go on and subjugate another group of people. That's how it happens.
And I have a word for it. I call it nation stating. It's where, you know, where a South African says the British destroyed my family and poisoned them or left them in, you know, the first concentration camps during the war, and therefore you hate an everyday Englishman. What we have to understand is that a co-opted fool, young fool, like we all were born young fools at the end of the day, was forced into doing something by a parasitic predatory corporate that wanted the diamond fields of Kimberley, and later, once gold was discovered in Johannesburg, wanted the gold fields of Johannesburg. And in fact, the equity once was known as Goldfields. I don't think there's one that's called Goldfields anymore listed, but they all became Anglo-American. And these are all the fulcrum names. It's like Standard Oil to Rockefeller, Anglo-American to Rothschild, on all of the things. And these Harry Oppenheimer and all of these names that Barney Bonato, who is a name changer. It's interesting South African history. You'll like this story because you love a good story. The biggest check ever written in the world was written in a tent between Cecil John Rhodes, another emissary that I think is tainted because he promised to paint Africa red, you might know, from Cape to Cairo, for the Queen. And everything that's visited on the Queen was captured and owned and held by a banking organization that already held them because they borrowed for too many wars. So they are captured puppets to themselves. That doesn't mean we can't hate a little bit on the royals, I'm sure, if that's your bag. But the interesting thing is that was the biggest check ever written in its South African history, and he was Isaacson Bonato, and he'd caught the other half of the market that they want. They don't want capitalism. They talk about capitalism. They want absolute monopoly, always. And Rockefeller was clear on this, you know, quite clear. He's got a number of very, very core quotes on that, and my mind is racing to pull out a few.
But the similarity is they want democracy, but there's never any democracy.
Correct. So there's this is known as the inversion, perversion, and the multi-layer of conversation, where you inherently have a message for the peasants that sounds virtuous, and you have a message internally amongst your controlling cartel that is almost entirely the opposite. That's right. Rockefeller said competition is sin. You must own it all. And he used press gangs that beat up all the small oil operators in the Central America, Northern America, but in the middle states as well. And then got a deal with Rothschild that gave him very cheap transporting, lowered the price. So they used pumps and dumps all the time, made everybody else bankrupt, and then bought them up for pennies in the pounds. On a controlled basis, that they didn't get the same deal for bringing their oil to market, because the one key thing with oil is it's big and it's heavy and it's not a block, it's a liquid. You need to carry it to market where it can be used. And so they create cartels that actually monopolize industries. And everybody thinks, and that's the amazing thing, is where's the antitrust callers on Alphabet, Google? You know, you're talking about running 50 or 60% of the world's operating system on devices. You're talking about number one search, maybe not so much anymore with AI coming out, but probably still. And you're talking about engine And then you're talking about YouTube, number 2. And in devices, you're talking about entire capture of industries, almost from alpha to omega here. And then you think there's competition because there's Apple, and it has a slightly different operating system. But you realize neither of them have batteries that you can remove because they're both spying on you and listening to you and recording you. That's when you realize that you are in an oligopoly of status control, technocratic fascist oligopoly with statist remit. They want to know what you're saying, what you're doing. They want to know who they're dealing with. They want to capture illicitly and be on all your private conversations. They want to be able to profile you. Palantir wants to do all the databasing for everything, and they are bringing a global technocratic communism. And the problem is whenever they do their communism, they create a great crisis, and they always utilize it as a bit of population control as well. And if you think about America as 4.5% of the global world population and much higher living standards compared to the Asia and the rest, where, just a circle around China and Indonesia has got more than 50% of the population in it. It's quite clear to me there's a great leveling coming, and the West is it. And you look at some of the sub or non-economic, absolutely destructive policies that are being pursued in Britain, very totalitarian, and they are preparing you for a global restriction on movement, expensive costs. Carney was out talking 2 days ago that, travel should have much higher. So tax is the remedy for all forms of behavior. So they talk about the green agenda, which is a hoax, as you know, and then they say, well, we must tax so that less people fly. It must, you must really need to do something, The way we change behavior is tax. Well, it's just an excuse for another avenue of extraction, and another reason why you need to be rich if you want to retain your freedoms.
Okay, Francis, I want to quickly ask you something, because at some point we're going to talk about solutions, but we are a long way off from that right now. But I've been looking at a lot of this controlled demolition, and if you read things like Dennis Meadows, limits to growth, and you read the Committee of 300, this whole demolition is a controlled demolition. At some point, these bankers decided, do you know what? We've sucked enough out of this system. Let's move on to the next place. So they went from Spain to Holland to Britain to Washington. Maybe they're still in the city of London. But it seems like they've had enough now. And, they deindustrialized the West. This all started in the 70s and 80s. They've limited the growth rate of fertility, feminism and the climate, and you don't want to have kids, and it's too expensive to have kids, and who needs a man? And so now we don't even have a replacement for the West. And I think there is a war against white people, which is funny coming from a brown kid. They are destroying the West, and it's all been by design. And now, the East is rising. You go to Malaysia, the roads are great. The infrastructure is fantastic. You go to China, I mean, it's incredible. Why are they doing this though? Like, is it just because they use a place, suck it dry, and then move on to the next place? I mean, what's going on?
Yeah, so inherently, I believe the cult that is in charge aspires to a far smaller population globally. Climate is actually, you're the problem. It's a fancy way of saying you're the problem. You're screwing the planet up. We don't want you. And the solution for that is they get rid of you. That's what happens when the girlfriend says, we're not going out anymore. She throws your case and stuff out. But the thing is, you survive that and you go somewhere else. In this situation, they want. They are without religion, yet they aspire to godliness. And their ultimate power is the right over life of another human. So inherently, you are cattle to them. You're just a different form of livestock. And if you look at the law, the way it was written, we're all being pledged as collateral against Britain's debt. Your tax receipts and all of that are part and parcel. In terms of the person, which is in capital letters, that will say your name, and that is all part and parcel of you being corporatized, even as an individual. You are like a cow on a big one of those westerns that you see, Yellowstone or one of the others on those big farms. Only it's the other cows that think they have right over your life. And it's a spiritual war. I think they like a good ritual sacrifice. I think this guy Kirk, I think that was shot, is very much an example of them. He turned on his funders. He took the funding, I think, to advance his political career, but he suddenly discovered that Israel seemed to be behind a lot of things.
Dude, he was asking some very awkward questions near the end.
Yeah,
I mean, I wasn't a fan of his, but I was surprised at some of the things he was saying. It was like he was having a real revelation. And it's just interesting that the guy who was asking some very awkward questions, particularly, for example, October 7th, he was like they just stood down for 6 hours. You know, it takes 45 minutes to fly from Jerusalem to Gaza. I mean, it's no bigger than the state of Jersey. And like, what the hell? Where was everybody? Israel is like the whole IDF. Israel is IDF. And like, where was everyone? You're like, are you kidding me? Like, I've heard him say this. And I was like, wow. And then he's dead.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed, Trump said something about him, and it was really weird and awkward for me, because he goes, oh, and Charlie's, beautiful wife. It's like, he's just died. Like, what's beauty? Like, why are you even talking like that? Like, there's something really sick about these people. Trump is sick. Like, I know I lose a lot of people, supporters, for saying this, but there's something very weird about that guy. Like, if someone lost their life, I wouldn't go and say, oh, his wife is beautiful. Like, what's that got to do with anything? I mean, anyway,
there's detail that's not required when paying condolences, is it? Yeah.
No, there's something weird.
And it actually, to me, it sounds predatory, and it probably is predatory. I mean, it's very much like that. And the thing is, you now have a woman with 2 kids, very young kids. It's almost the kids I worry for most in
Absolutely.
that little thing. Because there's nothing they like more than seizing the offspring of someone they've ritually sacrificed and flipping them to their means. And it's a very dark form of means, in my opinion. And, it's a blackmail racket. If you watch Snowden, our friend, what's his name, who was in jail, help me.
Assange
and the Epstein files, and you haven't concluded how the greater political system operates. And then you start retrospectively integrating it and knowing that this is rife in Britain from Ted Heath and all of the others, how they bury it, and they might let something happen once the guy dies, that it be known that he was a pedophile.
Oh, no, dude, listen, this is all wrong.
Starmer, who was the rape gangs, is very right in there. So, it's very much, you have to be part of
But you know what? But the right-wing commentators will make it out that only bad Pakis and Muslims are the rapists out there.
They'll do divide and conquer on that. And I don't
that's not saying that there aren't really bad grooming gangs and everything, but they're across the board. I mean, there's just bad shit going on, but it's all about the divide and rule. And they always, I call them the third force. It's the drama triangle. You always have to ask. If you take a beating, you don't get angry with the stick. You find out who the handler was. Those grooming gangs are the stick, and they should face very strict justice. But you've got to allow who's been almost, I get to the point where I actually think it was encouraged and suggested that there's opportunity there. I don't even know if it was wholly organic, that they were just that evil and they went about it, because it involves drugs, it involves a lot of things and predatory behavior. But they've clearly entrenched it quite well now. Now you have to root it out. But and the likes of Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, they're grooming such a guy also for a similar role in South Africa, who talks about the ANC, says all the right things, but is very pro-Israel. And I think they trimmed Alex Jones's wings. I think he's a bit like that. Tucker Carlson, they'll all be falling under that. They've also Tucker's walked a little bit on the Israel side, but maybe allowable to a degree, because part of them, if you think about how they shot that guy, they want you to know, if you want to just get rid of someone quietly, they're famous for poisoning. It was their trick, the ring poison and dropping it in the drink, and later it's plausible deniability. The reason I say it's a ritual sacrifice is there's many ways to kill people. You don't go put a man on a roof with a gun and create shock and horror. That's a show. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to talk about my consultation service. Many of you already know about it, but just in case some of you don't, I'm offering these online. If you're not sure about what steps to take with your health, if you're facing surgery and you're confused about meds or struggling with a diagnosis, this is where I can help you. I offer consultations to educate and empower you, showing you how the system works from within and how to pick the right doctor, what questions to ask, and most importantly, how to get the best out of every medical encounter. Take Lucy, for example, who came to me for advice on a revision rhinoplasty. Dr. Malik was fantastic, prepared, transparent, and honest. He highlighted important risks and gave me valuable points to think about. A breath of fresh air. This is just one of many reviews, which you can see on my website. I've helped people with everything from joint replacements, autoimmune conditions, heart problems, weight loss, addiction treatment, and decisions about vaccines, just to name a few. With years of experience as a consultant surgeon in the NHS and the private sector, I know how the system works inside out. My role is simple: to be your advocate, guide, and ally in getting the best care possible. So folks, if this resonates with you, if you're feeling like you're in a dead end, don't know how to move forward, or suddenly got a medical issue that you just want help with, book a consultation today. www.docmalik.setmore.com. Just type in docmalik.setmore.com or visit my website docmalik.com and you'll find the consultation section and then you can book from there. Folks, I hope I can help you. It's been an absolute joy being able to help patients again, and I'm really glad I've found this little niche area now where I can still use some of the wisdom and knowledge that I've accrued, not just through the years as a medical doctor, but even more recently through the hundreds of podcasts that I've recorded. Okay, folks, back to the podcast. Enjoy.
That's stage. That's a theater. You put on a show when you do that. You can actually top someone organically that it looks like an accident. And believe me, they have many means. They even have a heart attack gun. Some people have seen various other things. So that's a communication of a message and a bit of a ritual. And they like to do that because they want you in fear of them. You see what we can do, and no one can prove anything. Well, it's your captured set. You own America. You own that police. There was some guy who also turned out to be chosen. That was the fake guy that took all their attention, and the real shooter ran away.
Yeah. So I mean,
now they've released him. The guy. It wasn't me. It was just an old man who happens to be chosen. And so I mean, this is all completely managed.
Can I just pause you for a sec? And you mentioned, Nigel Farage, and I'm really glad you did, like in Tommy Robinson. So I have an issue with these characters: Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, Ben Shapiro, Douglas Murray, Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
They're dangerous. They're like the Fabians, the wolf in sheep's clothing.
They're the inverse Fabians. Muslim man dad, and Israel, Friends of Israel.
Exactly. And if you look at the English Defence League, the company's house, the original name was English Defence League and Jewish Defence League or something like that. Like there was something English and Jewish Defence League. It was really weird. I was like, what? But the thing is, they say a lot of good things. So, for example, mass migration is bad. And this is coming from someone who was the son of a migrant. But, the UK is full of migrants, Angles, Saxons, the Jutes, the Huguenots, the original people, the Britons, the Picts, well, they've been exterminated. The Vikings came along, it's waves and waves of migration. But the thing is, what we're seeing now is a controlled, global, multi-billion-dollar logistical effort to mass and swamp people in their native countries and destroy their local communities and cultures. This is wrong, and this is being organized. But all these right-wing commentators that I mentioned, they say, how bad it is, but they never ever point to who's holding the stick.
Correct.
They never say.
And Elon is doing that as well. He's
I know.
I'm agitator, and I keep answering. But who pays them? Who runs it? He'll say, "Look what the New York Times saying and Washington Post." I said, "Who owns him, Elon? Who pays them? Who's behind it? Why are you stopping there?" I just permanently, if I've got a spare moment, I keep throwing it. And who's the owner? Why don't you say the name? What kind are they? Are they, no, they all stop short. So they are agent provocateur. And there are plenty white ones that are cultivated that will go 9/10 truth. So what they do, it's also I call it the nodding. There's a sales technique. I mean, we used to work in the gym industry. So you write your name down. Okay, it's Amran Malik. How are you, Amran? How are you doing? So you would like to be a little leaner, would you? And you go, yes. You'd like to feel fitter. You climb those stairs. You don't, puff so much. Yes, yeah. And you would also prefer to appear more attractive and have more muscle tone, maybe. And yeah. So you get someone in what I call the cascading fountain of yeses. And this is where they all come from. They start with real truths that the very force that is funding them. So that's why you have my left hand fighting my right hand, but they're both of the same body. The very people who's funding the immigration, they then fund the other side that says all the cascading yes truisms. They get you in that truism, and then they say the solution is it's the gangs, Paki man bad, Islam man bad. And no, it's actually not quite like that. There's some Islamic people that need locking up. There's some Christian people that need locking up. And there's definitely some controllers that really need more than knocking up, who are agitating. And it reminds me of the red ants and the black ants and who's shaking the tin, because they get on just fine out of common decency generally. It's only when you keep pushing them into each other that you actually create that. So who's the tin shaker? Not the stick. Who's the beater with the stick in his hand? And it comes back to the same people every time. I mean, you just have to look at the Barbara Specter clip, and she tells you exactly who is going to be behind it. Europe cannot be a homogeneous society anymore. Jews have to be at the front of this revolution, and we will be resented for it. No. Who gets to say, you tell us that A, that society can't continue exactly as it was doing just fine. B, who says you, not of this country, get to determine what's right for this country? I mean, the absolute, and they have a word for it, chutzpah, of that statement tells you the funding and the controlled demolition. And the next Bolshevism, and people should really read the brutality of Bolshevism in great detail, because the religious people were they took the priests, they cut their skin here and they peeled it back over their hands and nailed it into the altar. That was called the glove torture. This was all these Ashkenazi Bolsheviks that were funded by London and New York. And in fact, many people don't know, American troops went into the hinterland of what is a big country to just in case, because the Tsar actually was quite popular, and the White Russians in the rural areas, to counter them and discourage them from going, because the revolution was essentially a St. Petersburg and Moscow thing. And America paid, and American soldiers were there ensuring them, because they never went into the First World War. He wasn't interested in wars. He wasn't interested. The Romanovs were not interested. He valued the lives of his soldiers and various other things, and he didn't go into the war. And in fact, some of the resentment towards the descendants of the Tsar stemmed back to even before that, when the Mongol Turkic Ashkenaz were heavily defeated by the Russians many, many years. And there's actually a Russian on horseback in battle. The history escapes me, the name of the person, and they said, we will revenge this. So you're talking, many people talk about
I think you're right. There's Peter the Grey and Catherine the Grey. And
none of those two, but this wasn't him. He was a specific, it was possibly Ptolemy, I don't know. It was a general. Anyway, and he defeated the Horde. And the Golden Horde were essentially people that essentially said, we're coming. We'd send a rider and say, we're going to ransack your village and we'll slaughter all of you, or you can surrender. And then you'll be our serfs and slaves and pay extraction to us. But if you put up a fight, we'll kill every man, woman, child, right down to the babies. And they poured molten gold down the mouths of the leaders in public places. So you're talking about absolute cruelty, absolute cruelty. And this is the DNA. And the Russians defeated eventually that, and it stopped the advance because they were very successful. They'd mopped up all of the steppe and into Eastern Europe. So it's fascinating, anyway, the whole history. We did leave hyper-stagflation, and I do want to finish that.
Yeah.
The whole thing is we had a Goldilocks economy because of globalization and lots of money created. Instead of pushing prices up like milk and bread at the till, it pushed asset prices up, like property and other things. And you all felt wealthier, which is what I felt. It's what you felt. There was parties everywhere. It was good times. This is the roaring 20s before the Depression. And I remind you of that Leonardo DiCaprio movie. He's a dodgy character as an actor himself, but the film, I'm referencing The Great Gatsby, if you recall it, where the house with all the partying and all of that, the pool, and then later you come near the end, just before he gets shot, and there's some furniture in the pool, the house is all run down. This is, unfortunately, the cycle of events. And we are now deglobalizing. We've got all this debt and money that's created, the exorbitant privilege that is given to these ruling class families to extract rental, usury, as you say, I say usury, but usury rental extraction for the privilege being given, awarded the privilege by a government, that this separate group of people has the right to borrow money into existence and charge us an interest on it. So think about how your system is set up. And the interest rates are now going up, and it costs more than the defense bill in America. So we are in a debt-based collapse, and the crowding out of state is taking place. That private business isn't existing. You're not in a capitalistic society, although they're going to blame everything that happens on capitalism. You are in a cacocracy mixed society of very advanced socialism, communism attack vector in terms of your freedoms, in terms of fascist corporations intertwined with state, which has escalated recently, with government now taking direct percentages in corporations, such as Intel recently by Trump. And they positioned him as this master deal maker because of The Apprentice and the supposed narrative around his property prestige, forgetting the fact that he went bankrupt 6 times, and his bank was Chase Manhattan Bank, run by David Rockefeller, who never called in his loans and carried him through the last property crisis of the savings and loans in the 80s.
$1 billion. $1 billion. Like,
yeah, I mean, imagine that. Oh, he's our boy. We won't call his loans in. He carried on swanning around in fancy cars and fancy houses and being allowed to do deals. And they kept him until the property market came back around and up, and he was carried through an entire economic cycle. Now, don't you try that with your bank. Now, that was David Rockefeller, him of 9/11. But Trump's going to tell you the truth about 9/11. Remember 2016, what a damn squid that was. And he's going to release the Epstein files. How did that pan out? So for all the people that are buying the Drumpf story, and the real name is Drumpf, Drumpf. His father was a name flipper. And in actual fact, I suspect he's one of them. But anyway, the point of the matter is you don't vote yourself freedom. You don't vote yourself freedom in this world. You're going to go through this and you have no control. The inevitability of this crash is, I say it doesn't matter what you suddenly do. People have Messiah complex. They think the situation is rescuable. Yeah. By putting a 747 into a 60-degree vertical dive into the base of a mountain. Now, I tell you, you can put the best pilot in the world. We can teleport him in there for that quarter of a second before impact. He's got nothing he can do. You're all going through that experience. Crash, container crash. It's over. So this is happening. It's 100% happening. And so many people will have cope with just that hard fact. You're going to go through a broad depression, population cull in the West, which is why I'm the guy who keeps saying you need to be out of the West. You've got a better chance of surviving. The Deagle stats are part of that, but you can see it. They're villainizing a certain tribe. And there's never been a mass genocide where there first wasn't a villainization of them. In other words, you need the others to think, well, they did do that and they had it coming to them. It's not like they weren't told. You have to get the other masses to hyper-normalize the fact that they're going to genocide somebody, because they should be thinking, geez, what if we are next? But they don't. They'll laugh. They'll say, oh, they got it coming. I can see certain characters in certain other ethnicities looking at a white genocide with glee, much like you've seen Kirk, who's been shot. The number of TikToks and videos of the liberal left of people laughing about a man being shot. I don't have a strong affiliation to him. I don't know enough about anybody. I got that he started to ask some good questions. He was 31 years old. If he's truly dead, which sometimes you have to think, is that the case? But assuming he is, it's an absolute tragedy for his wife and his children.
Absolutely.
And it's a murder for which you'll never get a true. They might throw you some patsy guy to take a fall for it, but you'll never really get the truth behind it.
Dude, this was a professional hit. This was not some random undisgruntled woke left blue-haired nut job just shooting him. This was a hit. And this was, like you said, sacrificial, an example. It was sick. And I agree with what you're saying about the genocide in West Asia. I don't like the term Middle East. I mean, what's middle? Middle what? It's West Asia, but they don't want to use that word West because the West is only, the best people here. But West Asia, what's happening there, absolutely, in Ukraine, when the Ukrainians were bombing Donbass and Lugansk, we didn't see anything. We never got a view of anything. All those innocent people being bombed in the streets, we didn't see any of that. But we are getting 24/7 like atrocity porn, genocide porn in our faces, and we are witnessing and it's by design. Like, if they did not want anything getting out of Gaza and any images or videos, we would not see anything. We would not know. They want us to see what's going on. And that in itself is...
It's a spectacle sport.
It's
They've
sick.
turned it into.
It's sick.
There's actually a very interesting video I was watching yesterday that I was passed by a few people that I speak, and he was looked Chinese, Far Eastern at least, and he was smart and he wrote it all up, and he was saying on the YouTube I can't say certain words, I'll just write it on the board, etc., etc. But he was saying they needed to be seen because he's saying what a lot of people I find are saying. I don't know if I'm just finding the stuff that will appeal to me and I'm getting confirmation bias, but a lot of people are saying the stuff I'm saying. He was saying it's a ritualized, it's quite easy. They could have poisoned the water and said, my God, there was sulfur, and just come up with a bullshit story, and a lot of people could have died. It's actually, they want those, it's 47% children, they want those children dead. They want those young, pure souls. It's like a soul harvesting thing. And they want it, and they want you to know that they're doing it. And he was saying it's similar to the art of war strategy where Chinese would fight with their backs to a river. What you do is you get the whole world to hate you and to let them know, because they all resent you, because you want an us and them final battle. And you want all people that are neutral within the tribe that would rather not be involved in all of this to have no other option but to galvanize and go with the hardcore. It's kind of like what I'd call the prison ground eventuality. The blacks sit with the blacks, the whites with the whites, the Latinos with the Latinos. If you've ever seen any of those, those films, they're in the lowest common denominator environment, then it becomes just ethnic. And they want to create such resentment and hatred towards their general behavior and conduct and activity. And quite a bit of information seems to be leaking out about this conduct, so that it becomes all against them. And then they go, it's a bit like Millwall football. I can use this club. Nobody likes us and we don't care. That sort of featurizing the fact that you are notorious and resented, so that everybody who is part of the tribe can't even go, there's no lukewarm. You have to polarize. And you have to go sit on the stand with the Aryan Brotherhood or with, the Pakistani Mafia or the Black Brotherhood or the Latino.
Yeah. But Francis, it's already happening. I can tell you right now, I've been so disappointed with so many of my colleagues who are of that, persuasion, faith, whatever you want to call it, and they called out the COVID nonsense and all the garbage. But when it came to this, they suddenly became rabid supporters. And you're like, have you lost your humanity? Like, are you not? I thought you were on Team Humanity. And it's like, no, they're on their team. And it's like, I don't have a problem with that. Look, I called out the bullshit within my medical profession. That in itself is a tribe, right? I'm one of like 10 people out of 300 medical doctors in the UK who spoke out. Okay, 10, 15, 20, maybe even 20, say even 50. That's not true. Say you had 50 well-spoken, outspoken, publicly spoken people criticizing COVID doctors, out of 300,000. That's not a lot. But you know what? I was one of them. I'm happy to call out my tribe, whatever it might be. If I see something, like the grooming gangs, I say, this is wrong. There's a problem here. It might not be bigger than the average. It might be the same as in every group, but the lens is on this. It might be that it is bigger than the average people and it's more than white people. But we need to look into this. We need to investigate, and this is sick, and these people need to be castrated, and if they're immigrants, deported. Like, we need to deal with it. I don't have a problem speaking out and doing that. But what I find troubling is, like, there's so obvious wrongs, and when I present this to my friends and colleagues of that group, they're not willing to acknowledge it. They will double down and keep digging deeper and say, nope, they deserve it. Like, we're the special people. I mean, I had Peter Breggin, a very famous psychiatrist who spoke about COVID and everything. And he goes, I'm an atheist at the beginning of the talk. And by the end of it, he was like, yeah, but we're God's chosen people. And, you know, we've resisted empire. And, like, you know, the problem is that other countries aren't letting these Palestinians escape. And I'm like, hold on a second, you're an atheist, but you're now quoting biblical stories and, you know, from this book and whatever, and you're the chosen people and you deserve it. And
I try to pride myself on logic. And it's amazing how many professional people, when you start pushing them as you were to those points, that the complete logic revert to type, the programming.
Totally.
And anybody who I've spent the large part of my last 2 decades deprogramming everything I was told and reframing. The degree to which highly, supposedly intelligent people who have certainly consumed a lot of academic material, become professional psychologists, past degrees, give you detailed, you know, analyses on your mental states and what they've observed, and then can get to a logic faux pas like you just described about one group of people being more meritworthy than another, and a God that happens to be that way.
Right? Have you got children?
The act of godliness is
right. I've got 3 children.
The logical, the logical. These guys, these satanic, because they are satanic. The logical way that they frame it, you have to just venture. This is Satan.
Yeah.
It's not a religion. This is Satan, and Satan means the opposition. It is entitlement. It literally is me being Liverpool and you being Man United, and I'm saying I'm a better team than you. It's tribalism to the nth degree without any basis in logic. It is a Satanism. It is 100% Satanism. It is the anti-God to say that I have a God that chose me.
Right. But listen, I'm gonna push back on something and say, look, we can't just say it's a whole group of people. Because it's just like saying all Pakis are grooming gang rapists and incestuous. And, you know, I'd struggle with that sometimes. And a lot of people say, look, it's the royal family, it's the bloodlines, it's the 13 nobility, it's the Babylonians. I don't know who the frack these people are. But I'll give an example. Like, the Israeli president was recently, just yesterday, in Chatham House here in London. And Chatham House is home of that, you know, British Institute of International Affairs or something. Now, according to the Committee of 300, like, Britain really is running the world right now. Like, the City of London controls Washington, DC and everything. Like, maybe the president of Israel was getting his marching orders from Chatham House and whoever they are. Like, what do you think of that?
I look at who's the most tightly wired cult that gets the most unique privileges. You had a Israeli operative of the Mossad child grooming in America. They supposedly picked him up, didn't take his passport, gave him bail with no funds, and allowed him to skip the country. I'm imagining if that was me or you, with our passports and that, we would have had our passports and our right to travel taken away. We probably would have had to pay quite a bit for bail, or we would have been retained. But there is quite clearly a unique don't touch rule. And the people that seem to have the most extreme version of untouchability, particularly in America, but also in a degree in the UK, that get afforded legislature written up in their name very specifically and a lot of other things, is to me that construct, that the chosens, the one that have been done there. And I can tell you they have one of the most tightest cults of reinforcing the propaganda, because I'm close. I'm close to people that are there around. And one Jewish woman was telling me how her son in South Africa went to Israel, and they have these Maccabi tours. They have to go to Israel. And she said to me, came back radical and brainwashed, radicalized. And I know they have these things. It's kind of like these sessions. They all do war so that they're all birthed of a similar conjoined. It's very good for a society. I was in the bad South Africa under apartheid young, and I did military as a white. It's very good indoctrination tool, military conscription of a kind, and telling them how they all want to kill you, a communist behind every bush. I actually believe that now again. I deprogrammed that and I started to put it back in. But anyway, the new evidence showed up, so it's quite interesting. But actually some of what Afrikaners were saying were correct, but some of what they were doing obviously quite clearly wasn't either. But so initially I rebelled from everything, and then I pick and mix concepts that actually, for what they wanted, a homogeneous state to exist, and without the rule of empire leaning over them, was what they wanted. But then the Cecil John Rhodeses of this world, the British Empire, Dutch East India Company managing in the British Empire, decided, no, you'll just be an outhouse of labor for us to utilize for extracting wealth out of those new lands. Don't forget, they sent criminals to Australia because they wanted to establish labor then. That was at the time when labor was needed, and there was a lot of territory grab that was actually required. And going back to your stagflation question, which again I still haven't answered, we're now in the reverse of that. The AI and the labor, the robotics and AI have done away with that. You don't need empty prisons to formulate and popularize a nation so that you can then control it through Freemasonry, through all the usual things. Go look at Canberra, all the streets set up, same as America, all of the same concepts, World Economic Forums, all of these committees, they're all conjoined as part and parcel of an elite ruling class versus the rest of the serfs. And I can tell you, that's how they go. But we're now in a phase where population isn't required because of the technological state that we've reached to the same degree. And that's another reason why they'll dispose of you, because you're just a useless eater, is the phrase that was allegedly assigned to Kissinger. And there's too many of you. It's much nicer and easier to not have so many people to manage. It's kind of be a capital intense business with 2 or 3 smart people, or have this whole world with all these labor and little Joe soaps, not very bright, who always phoning in sick type business with thousands of employees. Which one do you want? If you're making the same revenue, you're going for a couple of like-minded people at your level and be done with the rest, have a capital-intensive business. Well, that doesn't mean kill, but that's my chosen business over the highly labor management taxing one. And I think they've got to that point where AI and robotics, they think, are within striking distance of being able to fulfill a lot more of the menial things. You're seeing factories in China that are incredibly robotized. There's literally one operator who's just on standby, who waits in case something breaks down and has to do routinized maintenance. And it's a switch on, switch off system that could just churn out widgets. So, I mean, we are getting to that point. And I think the concerns that everybody should be thinking about is you're going to have the inverse. It's kind of like going to the pole, going back to the Goldilocks economy that Greenspan gave you in the Pumpamentals, is the 6 months of summer at the North Pole. Now, in this beautiful symmetry, you unfortunately have 6 months of winter to detoxify all the largesse of the glorious Great Gatsby roaring 20s. And now you have the 30s. And that is where we are coming from. So what you're going to find is the exact opposite. Stubbornly high prices and climbing in an environment, the job market is dog shit. There's 600 CVs per job. Everybody's qualified. The pay is not that impressive, but everyone's fighting cat and mouse to get it. It is complete inverse Goldilocks. And that's what we are facing. And there's a detox. And the West, particularly America, which is the hegemon, is so hopelessly over indebted. There's no chance they will meet all their promises in their unfunded liabilities. So either those people need to die off, or they need to do a New Deal. Now, that was something Roosevelt did in the 30s. So you're going to watch. I will give you buzz phrases that you must watch out for in the coming next 5 years. And a New Deal is definitely going to be one of them. And that came out with Roosevelt, because basically that's negotiating an insolvency and saying, Hey, there's only this much. We've got to do this. How do we do it? Okay, everybody gets UBI and CBDC. You don't get pension, but you can get UBI and substitution thereof. And they get paid tokens, but you've got to have complied with your medical interventionist policies, which require you've had your regular shot, etc., 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 and all of this score, and it's complete control. If you end up in that category where you have to submit and be a recipient of UBI, it comes with a social score, it comes with automatically required compliance to a very high level. It will get more onerous, and it will terminate you in the end, whatever medical interventions they do.
Absolutely. They're going to kill you off. That's the whole point of it, to make you sick and dependent. You know, before you carry on, Francis, I've talked about this in my very simple lay term. I'm not a financial wizard like you, but I've said the age of consumption and consumerism is over. Now it's the age of consolidation of their power. And whereas before labor was a resource, now it's a liability. That's why they don't want us anymore. Correct. They don't need us consuming anymore. They just need to consolidate their power. They have all the wealth. They've got all the resources. They just don't want us to take it away from them.
That's right.
They're fucking assholes.
They are multi-generational, if you want to use the phrase arseholes, multi-generational psychopaths that have been planning this for an extended period. And this is their, I call it the psychopath's ball. This is the premier event. You are born to see this era out. You are literally going to be witnessing the psychopath's big night out, the big coronation. Let's call it a coronation, the psychopath's ball's coronation. And one of the best things you can do is be out of the West, because when I started with my funny, lengthy stories about surfers and environment, what I'm actually saying is you're going to have such a depressionary, recessionary environment. You wouldn't get investment capital to start a flipping tiddlywinks competition when this is done. You're going to have so much debt. You're going to have such onerous taxes. You're going to, in the UK particularly, awful. The funding and the finances are absolutely, absolutely diabolical, awful. The serfdom classes is going to be just about everybody, but those that are prepared exceedingly well. You need optionality, because there's a real call to action that comes out of this discussion. We're not just going to talk a bunch of doom or black pill stuff. Actually, you right there, listening to me speak to you, you have action to take. You have very serious action today to take, and it's 2 minutes to midnight in the famous Iron Maiden album.
Oh, okay. Then let's talk about some of those solutions. Because look, I'm at that casino table and I'm very much on the wrong side. They're screwing me over. I spent my life trying to study and become an orthopedic surgeon and a consultant. I was a shit businessman. I just wanted to work, get a job, get paid. But you know what? Now I don't even do that. Now I'm a self-employed podcaster. And the thing is, like, I've got a mortgage. I need to pay that off. I'm not in any other debt. But I'm on the wrong side of the casino table. I don't know how to play this game of life. And a lot of people that I know are in the same situation. Everything is tough. Everything is hard. And it's like, I don't know why silver is being kept down. I don't know why, I just don't know, like, how to win at this. I don't know whether to put the little bit of money I have in crypto or gold or silver. I don't know which country to go to. You said get out the West. Like, where is a good place? Like, so let's talk about solutions, my friend.
I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.